My spouse has dementia. That's not just a statement, it's the name of this podcast. Oh dear, I'm having a senior moment. That's what we say when we forget a person's name, or where we left the car keys, or why we walked into a certain room. We laugh and dismiss the underlying fear that our forgetfulness isn't momentary, that it's really an early sign of dementia. What if it's your spouse who's having these senior moments? What if your fears become reality? You're listening to My Spouse Has Dementia, a podcast that uses personal stories, occasional interviews, and simple rituals to support caregiving spouses. I'm Zita Christian, writer, life cycle celebrant, caregiver. My husband has Alzheimer's, late stage. Dementia creates unique hardships for a caregiving spouse. There are financial decisions, end-of-life arrangements, family pressure, anger, grief, changes in physical intimacy, and those are just some of the challenges you'll face. I hope that by sharing my journey with you, you'll find something helpful, maybe a new perspective or a moment of humor, and a way to survive. This is episode number 1. I call it Getting the Diagnosis. My husband Dick is a gentleman, a handsome, honest, hardworking, romantic man 8 years my senior. He likes to buy me jewelry, especially for birthdays and anniversaries. I'm recording this in January of 2022. Our 40th anniversary was last summer. We didn't celebrate. He doesn't know who I am. That's a slight exaggeration. There are only a few times a day when he doesn't know me. Most of the time he just doesn't know my name. But on some level he does know me, and that's when he calls me honey. One day after a stressful bout of disorientation, Dick looked puzzled and he said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Honey." That's when he just stared at me and said, "The real one?" I assured him I was the real one, though frankly there have been a time or two when I've questioned who I'd become, more specifically, mourned who I no longer was. And when that identity crisis rolls in, I remind myself that I'm a writer and that I have a story to tell. As a writer, I know how important it is to start the story on the day that's different. For this story, that was the day we got the diagnosis. Now, a little context is important here because, as common as Alzheimer's is, every patient is different. Every patient's journey has its own signposts and potholes. So let me turn back the clock to a version of Once Upon a Time. In 1999, Dick took a 6-month leave of absence from his job as the finance manager of a car dealership so that he could hike the Appalachian Trail. That's a 2,160-mile-plus walk in the woods from Georgia to Maine. I'll tell you a lot more about that journey in future episodes. For now, just know that Dick had never backpacked before going on that adventure, and he had absolutely no sense of direction. What he did have, what he has always had, was determination. He turned 60 while hiking the AT. 4 years later, on Labor Day weekend, he had a heart attack, a big one. He was halfway up a mountain in Vermont. 3 stents later, he recovered 75% of his heart. That was as good as it would get. He went on to hike again and climb a lot more mountains, though now he couldn't breathe at heights above 10,000 feet. There would be no more photos of him above the clouds. For a while, Dick saw his cardiologist and our family doctor 4 times a year to monitor his heart and the meds that he was taking. I always sat in on the appointments so that I could take notes and ask some questions. Dick got stronger, and he continued to hike, but only with a group. You see, that was the agreement that we made. I didn't worry knowing he was with a group. Doctor appointments changed to just twice a year. Things looked good. Well, okay, not everything looked good. Around 2005, 2 years after the heart attack, I told our family doctor that Dick had become noticeably forgetful. The doctor asked Dick a few questions, and Dick answered with some funny comment. He has always had a good sense of humor. It made him and the situation seem normal. I noticed the doctor had a new poster on display in the examining room. It featured a drawing of a disgruntled old man and a list of behaviors to watch for, and then this big caption that said, "Is it Alzheimer's?" Dick and I had been going to this doctor for nearly 20 years. He knew us. He and Dick often talked about hiking. He didn't seem worried and suggested that we observe for a while. I knew he believed me, though there were times when I questioned myself, like the day I accused Dick of conveniently forgetting something I had asked him to do. We were standing in the kitchen. I'll never forget the agony in his voice when he said, "I don't want to forget." I felt horrible. I felt ashamed. And in years to come, I would feel that shame many times. I've come to think of that incident in the kitchen as a small but meaningful stepping stone on the path to acceptance, something we would both struggle with as time went on. A few years passed. Behavior that was annoying became dangerous. Dick would wash his hands and leave the water running. He'd turn on the stove and forget to turn it off. One day we were running errands, and he got upset with me for stopping at a red light. "Go, go, you're supposed to go." Another day he went to the post office to mail his sweepstakes entries and buy stamps. He left his driver's license on the counter. Yes, he was still driving. Giving up the car is a story for another episode, and so is his sweepstaking hobby. More time passed. More than once, Dick mangled the family checkbook. He'd been a finance manager at a car dealership for almost 30 years and could calculate interest rates and payments in his head. In the grocery store, he computed change faster than the cash register. It wasn't like him to make errors in math. Fortunately, I could fix the checkbook. Then one morning he was at his desk in the bedroom working on his computer, looking for new sweepstakes, something he did every day. I was carrying a basket of laundry up the stairs. I heard a strange man's voice. It was coming through the computer. He was telling Dick to click a certain button on the screen. Now understand, this was way before FaceTime and Zoom and any kind of live chats. I dropped the laundry basket. I ran to the desk and took the credit card from my husband's hand. I spoke to the invader in the colorful language I'd heard growing up in a Navy town, and then I shut down the computer. Dick didn't understand why I was so upset. He explained that his computer had frozen, and right when it did, a man said he was from Microsoft, and he could see that Dick's computer wasn't working, and the man could fix it. All Dick had to do was give him a credit card. My hand shook. "Did you? Did you give him our credit card number?" "No," he said, and then added, I don't think I did." I called my friend and computer guru, Marcia. You'll hear more about her in future episodes. Understand, Dick and I live in central Connecticut. Marcia lives just outside Boston. She grabbed her tools and hopped on I-90. 2 hours later, she walked through our front door and immediately attacked the invaders, ravaging Dick's computer. It took hours. Then Marcia went with me to the bank, where we spent more hours working with bank security to make sure the accounts had not been breached. Then we contacted my credit card company and all 3 of the major credit bureaus. Normally, I'd have no issue dealing with the bank or the credit bureaus on my own, but the what-ifs, rising from the takeover of Dick's computer, rattled me in a new and alarming way. At Dick's next medical appointment, I told our family doctor about the checkbook mess and the computer fiasco. Something was seriously wrong. The doctor nodded. Calmly, he handed Dick a pad of paper and asked him to draw the face of a clock, show the time as 10 past 11. Well, I can't describe how frustrated I suddenly felt. I needed help. How could a simple drawing reveal anything of value? Dick drew the clock and gave the paper to the doctor, who looked at it and then passed it to me. Dick had drawn something like a circle. It was lopsided, but his intent was evident. Oh, but the numbers, crudely drawn, misshapen, they were scattered all over the page, some inside the circle, some outside, some backwards, a hodgepodge of confusion. This is what was in my husband's head? I wanted to leap out of my chair, wrap my arms around him, and tell him not to worry, that we would figure this out. But he didn't look troubled at all. Our doctor looked at me with, how can I describe his eyes? Sad. They looked sad. And I just sat there, numb. The doctor referred us to a gerontologist. We saw him, and Dick was diagnosed with early dementia. That was September of 2014 at the University of Connecticut Medical Center in Farmington. Dick's symptoms progressed. 2 years later, after a new battery of lab tests, Dick and I sat in the office of a neurology nurse practitioner. I fully expected her to confirm what I already knew, that the dementia had progressed. It was May of 2016, a sunny Friday, late in the afternoon. Dick had just completed the last of several tests the nurse had given him and was sitting on the opposite side of the room. He didn't have the mental Velcro to attach any meaning to her words, but I did. Aneurysm, vascular dementia, Alzheimer's. Dick had all three. My mind raced. He could take medication to delay the progression. Maybe there was some kind of physical therapy that he could do too. Maybe he could get into an experimental drug program. My brother-in-law had done that, and it was very successful. Maybe there was already a cure on the horizon. 5.5 years have passed since the day the word Alzheimer's took us hostage. My husband can't get a shower by himself. He can't dress himself. I help him shave so he doesn't put the electric razor on his tongue again. He needs help going to the bathroom. Sometimes he needs help walking. Sometimes he needs help eating. He is now in the late stage of the disease. Note I said late, not last. Things will still get worse. I know that. And there is still no cure. I know that too. Now and then, I get a glimpse of the funny, sweet man I married. Doesn't happen every day, but often enough to affirm that he's still in there, somewhere. In these last 5.5 years, I've learned a lot about dementia. Not technical aspects of the disease, but about its effects on a marriage. That's why I'm doing this podcast. I've put it off for over a year, because for the podcast to be helpful, I'll have to talk about things I'd prefer to keep private. And I do want this podcast to be helpful. Oh, to be sure, there have been a few funny moments on this journey, and I'll share those too. I'm saying to you, one caregiver to another, we need to know the physical, emotional, financial, and spiritual toll we have to pay. Our ignorance can be deadly, and I'm not kidding. A university study back in 2003 showed that in family caregiving situations like ours, 63% of the caregivers die first. Let that sink in. The survival statistics are better now, but they're still not great. I don't want to scare you. I want to prepare you. So if you're a caregiver of a spouse with dementia, or you know someone who is, join me on the journey. Follow the podcast on the app of your choice. Or if you prefer to read, check out the blog on the website, myspouseHasDementia.com. In the meantime, do this simple ritual. Every time you pour a beverage for yourself, hold the glass or the cup close to your lips. say the word resilient. Say it out loud. You need to infuse your beverage with the vibration of the word. It's coming from your spirit. And then drink. Imagine your beverage filled with the strength you need to take care of yourself. Last little thing I want to talk about now is support. We need the support of family and friends. I'm lucky to have my daughter, my son-in-law, my grandson, my sisters, my friends, and my neighbors. I have history with them, and that really helps when emotions are overwhelming. You'll meet some of these people in future episodes too. We also need a professional support group. More about that in a later episode too. Just for now, know that in the beginning, I wanted nothing to do with groups. Maybe that's how you feel too. But then the social worker in the neurologist's office started a group. Her name is Amanda. I had been working with her for a few months and really appreciated her straightforward approach. So I joined when the group launched. Her experience and insight have been a beacon of light in what can sometimes be a very dark place. Maybe you're already in a caregiver support group, and if you are, that's great. If you're not, please look for one. The Alzheimer's Association can direct you to a local chapter, and there you'll find information on local support groups. I'll put that link and some others that you might find helpful on the resources page of the website, myspouseHasDementia.com. You can get in touch with me there too. If you're already in a support group, please share this podcast with the other caregivers. Remind them that this is a totally free podcast, and remind them, as I'm reminding you now, we need to help each other on this journey. We need to survive. And finally, in the words of my friend Victoria Burdick, a retired hospice chaplain, between now and dead, you've got a purpose. Don't be timid. Thanks for listening.